Hello and welcome to this episode of our program Arab Affairs. As usual, we are discussing an important file in the Arab Affairs. Today we'll be speaking about the Middle East peace process, or the stalemate in the Middle East peace process. But this happens as the French envoy has been in Egypt on Thursday, held talks with Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and the Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil Arabi, on future steps his countries intend to do in order to prepare for another peace conference later this year. There was an initiative, a French initiative. There was a conference that was held with the participation of more than 20 countries, plus organizations, plus the Quartet of the Middle East. However, the Israeli and Palestinian sides were not really invited. The Palestinian side has welcomed the French initiative. The Israelis have said that the initiative would go down in history, but that was very much expected from the Israelis. Other steps should be taken by the French, of course, party who are trying to revive the stalemate in the Middle East peace process, also with the support, as usual, of Egypt and hopefully other Arab countries, the Arab League definitely. Throughout our episode, we'll be discussing the French initiative, the first phase of it when the conference was held and the outcome of that conference, the French envoy and his steps that he came to speak about to the foreign minister, of course, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and the Arab League chief. All that will be discussed later on in our episode. Before we start or proceed with our discussion, let's first have a quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week, and we'll come back for discussion.
In Syria's war-torn Aleppo city on Thursday, as key regime backer Russia blamed the United States for the lack of progress in peace talks. The local ceasefire came hours after U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned Moscow that Washington's patience was running out over breaches of a nationwide truce. Aleppo has seen some of the worst fighting in the war that has killed more than 280,000 people, but there is deep skepticism that the latest halt to fighting in the northern city will last. Peace talks aimed at ending the 5-year conflict have stalled, and the February 27th countrywide ceasefire between the regime and non-militant rebels lies in letters. The new 48-hour ceasefire was announced by Moscow late Wednesday in a bid to halt violence in the city, split since 2012 between a regime-held west and rebel-controlled east. Daesh terrorist group on Thursday stepped up suicide bomb attacks on forces of Libya's unity government, who suffered 10 dead. Forces of the Government of National Accord said in a statement that a suicide attack targeted the Abu Ghraib checkpoint. 10 members of the pro-government of National Accord forces were killed and 7 wounded in the blast. Forces allied to the GNA captured the town of Abu Ghraib on May the 17th as they advanced on Sirte, the terrorist stronghold in Libya. 32 people were killed and 50 wounded in a car bomb attack in Abu Ghraib the next day, targeting the forces allied with the GNA. Iraqi forces retook the main government compound in the center of the militant bastion of Fallujah from the Daesh militant group on Friday. A military statement said the federal police had raised the Iraqi flag above the building and were continuing to pursue the ultra-hardline militants who continued to hold other areas. Earlier on Thursday, Iraqi elite forces battled Daesh terrorist group in Fallujah, where an aid group says nearly 4 weeks of fighting have immersed civilians in a humanitarian disaster. Forces from the counter-terrorism service pushed into the Nazal neighborhood, consolidating their grip on the southern part of the city and working their way up to the center. U.S. President Barack Obama met with Saudi Arabia Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on Friday, with the conflicts in Yemen and Syria topics of discussion. Obama and the Deputy Crown Prince reviewed Saudi Arabia's efforts to make its economy less reliant on oil revenues. A White House spokesman said the Saudi Deputy Crown Prince also met with Defense Secretary Ash Carter. The visit comes after the Senate passed legislation that would allow families of September the 11th victims to sue the Saudi government despite Saudi objections.
Right. Welcome back, of course. And a senior French envoy held talks in Egypt on Thursday with Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and the Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil Al-Arabi, on his country's bid to organize an international conference later this year. Let's watch the report and we'll come back for discussion.
Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry held talks with the France Middle East envoy Pierre Vimontin in Cairo, focusing on Paris' bid to organize an international conference later this year to revive the Palestinian-Israeli peace process. The two officials discussed the latest efforts aimed at boosting peace negotiations in the Middle East. The French envoy briefed Shoukry on his intended talks with the Palestinians and Israelis. Foreign Minister spokesman Ahmed Abu Zaid said the French envoy was keen to hear the Egyptian views regarding the peace process. The talks also tackled future steps he will take to prepare for the conference. Also on Thursday, Arab League Secretary General Nabil Al-Arabi held talks with the envoy that tackled recent developments of the Middle East peace process. Negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians have been at a standstill since a U.S.-led initiative collapsed in April 2014. Earlier this month, representatives from 28 Arab and Western countries, the Arab League, European Union, and the United Nations met in Paris to discuss ways in which the international community could help advance the Palestinian-Israeli peace process.
Be the first to know. The news live at the site of the event. Information on events as they are happening. If it's breaking news, it's Nile TV. For ads on Nile TV, Egyptian Radio and Television Union, the economic sector, info at Nile International or call us.
Welcome back, and as I said at the very beginning, we'll be discussing the French initiative for the Middle East, whether or not it would be fruitful, whether or not it can really even push the situation a little bit or forward for some steps that we'll be discussing in our show. Let me welcome our guest, Ambassador Mohammed El-Shazli, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you very much for joining us.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Yes, the French envoy, whose country is preparing for another bid for a conference on the Middle East, has been in Egypt. He spoke with Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry, and he also spoke with Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil Al-Arabi, and the Secretary General of the Arab League has given some statements to our correspondent Linda Abdelatif. Let's watch his statements before we go into discussion.
The whole meeting was on the French initiative, which was materialized in a conference on the 3rd of June, which I attended. 29 foreign ministers were there. It was a very important step, and we are really grateful for the French government for coming up with this initiative to call for a meeting, that everyone in the world, all the important countries in the world were there, and they were saying, we cannot go on like this. The Palestinian question has to be resolved through the two-state solution, and this take place. There was a reference in the statement, very clear reference, that the need is to end the occupation that started in '67. This is a very crucial point, because the whole problem emanates from the occupation. How to get rid of the occupation and have to carry out United Nations resolutions. Reference to the resolution 242, 338 and so on was also in the statement that was adopted. What the statement very honestly lacks, and we told the French that, and I said it in my statement, and all the Arab foreign ministers who were there said it, that there is no time frame. The occupation started 49 years ago and still going on. So we want a time frame. Whatever the time frame that will be considered by the international community as reasonable, we would like to see that happen. And we would like to see also a mechanism to ensure that this is the implementation. I give the French envoy, Ambassador Pierre Vimont, this morning some of the ideas that the Arab countries are interested in. They were included in a resolution that was adopted by the foreign minister on the 28th of May. At present, we are, first of all, supporting the French initiative. Second, we believe that the French initiative should have more teeth to reach a concrete conclusion as soon as possible. That's why we speak about a time frame, and we need the question of mechanism for the implementation. That is what we are working on now.
Right, welcome back. And those were the statements by the Secretary General of the Arab League, Nabil Al-Arabi, a time frame and mechanism for implementation. Let me welcome you again, Ambassador Mohammed Shazli, former Assistant Foreign Minister, for being with us. And to further highlight this conference, there was a conference that was held in Paris, during which more than 20 countries attended. That is along with the United Nations, the European Union, and of course the Quartet and some other Arab countries concerned. The Palestinian and the Israeli sides did not attend this conference. How did you read the conference in itself, or how did you see the initiative in itself, and what's or rather what the contents of it?
The initiative is a ring in a chain of historical initiatives, which started with Security Council Resolution 242 and then 338. And then we had the Oslo process. And then we had, before that, Sadat's visit to Israel. And then we had the Saudi peace initiative on behalf of the Arabs. And then we had very recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, President Sisi spoke of security of the Israelis and justice and the state to the Palestinians. What were the reaction of the Israelis to those initiatives? The second day after President El-Sisi's words, and after a couple of days of the French initiatives, the Israelis appointed one Lieberman as Minister of Defense. And this is a sign of what the intentions are.
Let me take over the phone, I guess over Skype also, Mr. Shaheen, Fareed Shaheen, Rashid Shaheen from the Palestinian territories. Thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
If I may ask you about the French initiative, how did the Palestinian really grasp this initiative? How do you view it? How do you read it? What does it lack? And how do you view the side response towards it?
Well, I believe that this initiative was to strengthen the role of the European countries and other countries aside from America. As you know, America was the mediator for decades in the peace process, and there was no result. In addition to that, the Americans used not to be neutral in this peace process. And during my meeting with the French Council, with the executive committee member of the PLO in Ramallah before the conference in Paris, the French Council said that they would prefer to have an international meeting rather than only a sponsorship of the Americans. I think this initiative was also because of the American elections. I mean, during this year and maybe the next year, the elections will be held in the United States, and in that period, I'm sure the American role will not be effective or active as this conflict, as Palestinians we look at it, is the core issue of peace, not only in the region, maybe in the world. If this issue, if this conflict is going to be solved, I'm sure so many slogans of the terrorists which they use the Palestinian cause to raise is going to disappear. And terror around the world may be less than it is as it is now.
Yes, definitely. We all hope for this initiative, or for this French initiative, to succeed in order to put some obligations on the Israelis who do not abide by any international laws up till this minute. If I come back to you and ask you about two important issues in this initiative. One thing that the Palestinians and the Israeli sides were not both invited to the conference. Will they be invited in this upcoming one? And how did you view that? Second, Nabil Al-Arabi, the Secretary General of the Arab League, has said that the initiative in itself lacks a time frame and a mechanism in order to implement these steps. Yes. So from your point of view, putting into consideration that Israel has already given its decision of refusing the initiative, how do you view the situation here?
Well, I believe that the French preferred in the beginning that the Palestinians and the Israelis not to be included in this conference, because they want to cut the road on the Israelis from going and maybe spoiling or frustrating the people who are going to attend this conference. And that is this session, this first session in Paris, was for preparation actually. But the fruit or the conclusion of the conference, as Palestinians here, officials I mean, they were not satisfied or happy because there was no ceilings, no time limits for the next step, I mean, or for the end of the occupation. And I believe that this was maybe a mistake made by the French when they didn't ask the Palestinians or invite the Palestinians and the Israelis to attend this conference. Because in that case, if they did ask the Palestinians and the Israelis to attend the conference, well, in that case, the side or the party who is going to reject the initiative or the peace process is going to be clear, and it is, of course, Israel, because they announced their rejection from the very beginning. Mr. Arabi was very clear in his position when he said that there was no time limits, and he's correct, because you can't make an initiative and keep it open forever. There should be time limits, and in the beginning they said that if Israel is going to reject what they have offered, they will regarding the Palestinian state, they will reconsider their position, and that means if the French are going to reconsider their position from the recognition of the Palestinian state, that means many other European countries are going to reconsider their position, and that will be good for the Palestinians, because we lack this recognition from many important European countries.
Right. Mr. Rashid Shaheen, a Palestinian author from the Palestinian authorities, thank you very much for joining us over Skype. Back to you, Ambassador Shazli. And you were speaking that the French initiative or the French envoy came to Egypt just after President Sisi delivered or Egypt's vision towards or support towards the Palestinian cause. Please.
Yes, I'm saying that this is, a chain that has been going on since 1967. I mean, it is ironic now that we're talking of a time frame. I mean, the time frame has already passed. We are talking about an occupation that is now 50 years old. And now we start for a time frame. Dr. Nabil Al-Arabi said that the French initiative has no teeth. We do not expect the French to bite the Israelis for us. Those who need teeth are the Arabs. A peace process or negotiations is not two eloquent people exchanging words in a forum. It is what weight each party has. If you look at it now, the Israelis are in their strongest position ever, and the Arabs and the Palestinians are in their weakest position ever. You are asking the Palestinians to negotiate. Which Palestinians? Are we asking Fatah's opinion, or are we asking Hamas's opinion? And they are actually...
It's not just about Fatah and Hamas. There are also other
there are other,
Palestinian factions,
the main contenders in the balance are Fatah and Hamas. So if you cannot, and even the other parties, they are at each other's throats. There is no united Palestinian front. And then there is no united Arab front. The Arab front has crumbled. The Arabs are killing one another. They are fighting. The main ideological and the main ethical card we had against the Israelis are that these are the people who threw over 1 million Palestinians into refugee camps. Now the Arabs are throwing millions of Arabs into refugee camps. The Arabs are at their weakest point politically, ethically, militarily. The Israelis are at their strongest. So now you are going to negotiate a peace process while you are at your weakest ebb, and they are at their strongest zenith. what is presented by the Israelis. As we have said before, they welcomed the French initiative and the Egyptian.
Rather they rejected the French initiative.
They welcomed the Egyptian, and they responded. Let me say, they responded. They did not even welcome the Egyptian initiative. They responded. Let me correct myself. The Egyptian initiative and the French initiative by putting the biggest hawk in the Israeli political arena, Lieberman, as Minister of Defense. And they said recently that they are not getting out of Golan. And they said yesterday, I think, that also that being in Jerusalem is their historical right, and nobody should argue over that. And look at what, when we delude ourselves by speaking about the two-state solution. What is the Israeli concept of a Palestinian state? A demilitarized state, a state where the Israelis have the right to overfly with their air force, a state where their army has the right to make incursions at any time they choose. If we want to speak seriously about a two-state solution, we speak about two states equal in sovereignty, equal in rights, equal in power.
And how would that be implemented? Because
that
yes,
could only be implemented by a united Arab front.
Right. Let's speak frankly of what's going on the ground. There is no Arab united front at that particular timing we're speaking about, except for some few countries who are still on their feet. But I have seen, or we have witnessed, a country like France, a European country, taking the initiative of trying to put some steps in order to try to push a stalemate in the negotiations, or rather revive the dead negotiations. We have seen more than 20 countries participating in this conference, 28 exactly. We have seen the European Union, we have seen even the American position, which has been, I don't know if I may call the United States position towards the Israeli-Palestinian cause different or not, because the United States has never been so much clear about this situation. I mean, they speak something and they act another. And anyway, the French initiative, would it be different than the other initiatives, as you said, that have been ongoing throughout the past decades?
I don't see any reason for change. Rights for nations are brought by power. Power does not mean necessarily military power. It means military power, economic power, political power, media power, ethical power, legal power, all of these combined and mobilized. So long as you have not been able to mobilize your sources of power, you will never get any of your rights back. Let me tell you about the United States. The United States, in every presidential elections, you find all of the candidates promising to protect Israel's rights and Israel's security and Israel's existence. No one has spoken of the Palestinian rights, of the Palestinians' security, or the Palestinians' right to existence. And this gives you an example of the situation we are in. You don't even pay lip service to the rights of the Palestinians.
After this French conference, or the first phase of the French conference, because they are intending to carry out with another one later this year, the European Union and the United Nations met in Paris in order to discuss ways the international community could help advance the Palestinian-Israel, hopefully, peace process. If I may ask about those two world blocs, and I'm speaking here about United Nations, which is a world organization that is supposed to have the ability to impose certain resolutions that should be an obligation over countries. And the European Union, which has too many, relations, too many kind of relations with Israel, economic, diplomatic, political, and many others. How do you view the response of the international community, particularly those two entities we're speaking about, since they are supposedly they are strong and they have the ability to oblige countries? So what?
We are talking now about the United Nations and the European community. The United Nations has been involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict since the very beginning, since 1947 with the partition resolution. And then you have 242 and you have 338 and you have hundreds, if not thousands, of resolutions over the Arab-Israeli conflict. As I was telling you, these are legal and ethical cards. We have not been able to mobilize these cards to our favor. The European Union, they have their agendas for the Middle East. And unfortunately, there is no Arab agenda for the Middle East. So everything that is going to be...
What do you mean by an Arab agenda for the Middle East? I don't understand this. I mean, yes, the European Union or the Western could have an agenda that would serve their own interests. But what could be an Arab agenda for the Middle East?
The Arab agenda for the Middle East is the view of the future of the Middle East. How do we want our homeland to look like 10 or 15 years from now? Do we want it partitioned further? Do we want the Arab countries having solidarity with one another and having a unified bloc against their enemies? Or do we want the Arabs fighting each other, not country against country, but even the same country fighting itself? What is happening in Syria, what is happening in Iraq, what is happening in Libya, what is happening in Yemen. Do we want further partition? Do we want to see a Kurdish entity in Syria and Lebanon? Do we want to see a Shiite entity in Iraq and Lebanon? Do we want to see a Berber entity in North Africa? Or do we want the Arabs to remain one bloc?
If I may just say that we definitely want a Kurdish community in Iraq as an Iraq integral state. And they are very most welcomed, and we cannot even forget that Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was a Kurd. And that he was a Sunni and served under a Shiite Caliphate.
Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was a Kurd with an Arab identity. He was ethnically Kurdish. There is a big difference between this and this. I've always given the advance of example of Salah ad-Din. But this is not applicable to what is happening You have now in Kurdistan, you have the raised, when they go in action against Daesh, they are raising the flag of Kurdistan.
But
the flag of Iraq is nowhere to be seen.
Exactly.
If you want to go to the Kurdish entity in Iraq, an Iraqi, he has to get a visa.
And this is why I was saying a Kurdish community inside an Iraq integral state, an Iraqi state.
Indeed.
And that's what we really need here. But if that was not what is going on the ground, and I mean here that Syria is in crisis and still in crisis, we don't know when would the Syrian crisis be solved. Iraq is still fighting, and if not fighting its inside sectarian strife that it has, of course, putting into consideration the efforts made for reconciliation among all the sects and all this. But there are still some sectarian strifes that are going inside Iraq, Yemen and what is going on in Yemen, Libya and what is going on. This is the situation on the ground. There are some of the Arab countries who are still on their own feet. So this is why I was asking you, what could be an Arab agenda when we are at this particular stage? How do you want this agenda to be really emphasized or put, even by which countries exactly, and how?
I think this is a duty of all the Arab countries together to realize the danger that they are facing, and that giving our destiny to other powers will never solve our problems. What we are seeing is that we have negotiations for peace in Syria that are going on in Vienna, negotiations for solving the Arab-Israeli conflict going on in Paris. You had negotiations for trying to solve the crisis in Libya going on in Italy and in Britain. This will never do. There are foreign agendas. The problem in the Arab world now is that the Arabs do not control their destiny. They do not control their lands. Everybody is playing regionally and internationally in the Arab arena. You have the Turks are very active. The Israelis are very active. The Iranians are very active. The Europeans are very active. The Russians are very active. The truce that has been conducted in Syria was between the Russians and the Americans.
Exactly. You cannot
solve your problems that way. It's you either take your destiny into your own hands. We have seen giving our destiny to others in Sykes-Picot what it did to the Arab world. We have seen what the result of the foreign minister of a European country granting an Arab country to the Jews of the world. We did not even swallow the lesson yet after nearly 100 years.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see how will the French organize for the next upcoming...
I don't have to wait. I see what is going to happen, because it has happened before, and we are in the same path and in the same route. It's going to happen again.
We hope, and with all faith in God, in God's will, of course. We are just hopeful. We are just hopeful.
Let us be hopeful.
Ambassador Mohammed Al-Shazly, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much for joining us.
The pleasure was all mine.
Dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Next Saturday would be another Arab Affairs. Goodbye.